Part 183. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1826. Gretel's research on cranial blood pressure has gone hand in hand in several aspects. Not going well in several ways. In terms of medicine, the only thing he could get on tiptoe was kelp extract mannitol. The problem is that he cannot handle this thing alone. He can only keep urging the alchemist. How about it? Has it been extracted? When can it be extracted? Haven't all the samples been given to you? Yes, samples are still easy to find. Gretel got a large bundle of kelp, burned a diamond, and activated the limited wish spell. I need an extract called mannitol, which is a natural alcohol that is abundant in kelp. Its chemical formula is C6H14O6, and its molecular formula is. Thanks to the basic courses in the university and organic chemistry, which contain the molecular formula and chemical structure of mannitol, Gretel could use the limited wishing technique in a targeted manner. With a flash of light, the kelp turned into ashes and disappeared. A piece of white crystal powder fell into the beaker prepared by Gretel. Next is the work of the alchemists. They want to analyze the properties of this stuff, and then use various methods to extract a large amount of mannitol from kelp. The cost must be low, the output must be large, and most importantly, the purity must be high enough. It is so high that it can be made into an injection and intravenously dripped without causing side effects. It can't be purified. Yes, no matter how hard you try, the purity is never enough. You must use the original sample as the basis and use the magic circle to purify it. Actually, this is not a bad thing. With the original sample in our hands, we no longer have to worry about others taking away our business. Gretel could only do as they pleased. In addition to manufacturing and purification, he has a lot of other research to do. For example, for mannitol injection, what should be used to mix the mannitol? Distilled water? Normal saline? Glucose water? Forgive him for basically returning the basic theories of medicine and pharmacy to the teacher. To answer this question, we must start from scratch. For another example, what is the concentration of mannitol injection? 5%? 10%? 20%? What is the dosage? If intravenous infusion, how fast should the infusion be? What should you pay attention to during use, and under what circumstances should you stop taking it immediately? By the way, it is easy to eliminate the effects of drugs. As long as mannitol is defined as a toxin, it can be eliminated instantly with a detoxification spell. Even with such direction guidance, Greed still has a lot of things to study in the direction of drugs. If you don't study it thoroughly, you will never dare to use it on people. In terms of surgical blood pressure reduction, it is even worse. The 4 major surgical punctures, chest puncture, abdominal puncture, bone puncture, and lumbar puncture, are not required in the examination for practicing doctors. How many practicing doctors have passed the examination, but they tremble in front of patients and dare not start? As for reducing intracranial pressure, there are only 2 surgical methods. The simpler one is lumbar puncture and then placing a drainage tube. The more difficult one is to directly open the brain case, drill holes for drainage, or craniectomy to decompress. No matter which one, the difficulty is sky high. A method for measuring intracranial pressure has been developed. On the basis of blood pressure measurement, the spell model has been modified, and the spell can be used directly for non-invasive measurement. Compared with the previous method of doing a lumbar puncture and then measuring the cerebrospinal fluid pressure, it is much more convenient and safer, and the patient suffers much less. However, being able to measure does not mean being able to perform surgery. Of course, with the fierceness of the local spellcasters, they would really dare to open their heads if pressed hard, especially the necromancers. The problem is that even with adequate disinfection measures and therapeutic techniques to protect the brain, the mortality rate of craniotomy and decompression is still hard to describe. If the pressure is decompressed too quickly, the probability of brain tissue damage and collapse is too high. If it collapses, the brain will die. Poor Greet, although he was the deputy chief physician of the emergency department in his previous life, he was really not good at brain surgery. When encountering a head injury or suspected brain injury, in addition to saving the patient's life, he would definitely call for help as soon as possible. This thing is so professional. Brother, come on. The knowledge that I didn't understand in the past can only be replenished with tears now. While Greet was working hard to read books and papers, under the protection of healing techniques, he joined forces with the necromancers to explore the methods and rules of craniotomy and decompression. Of course, the skull cannot be opened if it can be opened, and the surgical trauma can be reduced as much as possible. Gretel's greatest hope is still in the group of spell decompression. Touch of Thirst. When will the dismantling of the spell model be completed? When can we determine which part of this spell model is responsible for spell range and spell power? When can this spell be made sensitive enough to reduce a certain part of the liquid in a targeted manner according to the needs of the caster? Like, reducing tissue fluid by 1%? Or 1% of the cerebrospinal fluid will do. When the cerebrospinal fluid decreases, the fluid in the cells and tissue fluid will leak water into the cerebrospinal fluid, which can also reduce intracranial pressure. Isn't the conjuration system still fruitful? Not even the necromancy system. Touch of Thirst is your necromancy spell. A small first-level spell that you haven't figured out yet. Boss, you are also an 18th level mage yourself, but you have not broken down and understood a small first-level spell. The conjuration system dared not speak out. The necromancers, facing the Plague Lord's accusations, bowed their heads to the dark wall one by one. So this is the research method of the Plague Lord? Each spell must be broken down into small pieces and understood clearly, and only then can there be countless tricks on his hands. However, basic research is always the most difficult. No matter how Gretel pressed and pressed, after half a month and a month of tossing about the necromancy system and the conjuration system, there was still no result. On the other side, His Excellency Rimmer, the Grand Duke of the vampire race, came up with something interesting. Cerebrospinal fluid. Grand Duke Rimmer opened the brains of 7 or 8 rabbits in succession and performed 7 or 8 lumbar punctures. The red light in his eyes became darker and brighter. What an interesting thing, very fascinating. The brain is actually connected to the spinal cord in this way. In this case, I can control the casting range of Thirst Touch and focus it on the cerebrospinal fluid. Okay. Brush. Well, the spinal cord was too damaged, the entire spinal cord collapsed, and the rabbit was paralyzed. Brush. Another paralyzed one. Brush. 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 Spicy rabbit head, hot rabbit head, etc. are all gone. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1827. The Grand Duke Rimmel, who had tasted the sweetness, devoted all his energy to the study and research of spells and medical knowledge during this period. Blood, tissue fluid, lymph fluid. The three transform each other and circulate continuously. The nutrients inside the human body reach every corner of the human body in this cycle. So that's it, no wonder sometimes when I suck too much blood, I get a weird smell. The Grand Duke clicked his tongue. Of course, normal blood sucking will not happen, but when fighting, if you activate the ultimate blood sucking ability and drain your opponent dry in an instant, the blood sucked will have a strange smell. So, this is to extract all the tissue fluid and lymph fluid in one go? You should keep this in mind. You don't need to pump so hard next time. Apart from choking on tissue fluid, it has no additional effect on defeating the enemy. Moreover, the lymph and tissue fluid taste very strange, much thinner than blood, and there are a lot of waste materials. That's not the point. The point is, how to use your talent to draw the fluid out of the brain and lower the intracranial pressure. You can control the blood. In theory, you can control other substances that transform with the blood. It's a liquid, isn't it? Greed held up his forehead and pressed his right thumb on his temple, trying to flatten the throbbing temple. What kind of evil had he committed? He wanted to listen to the thoughts of this great duke sucking blood. Of course, he also knew that Grand Duke Rimmer was very restrained in this regard and did not comment all day long, such as how was the blood I drank before, or so and so's blood didn't taste good and the like. In such a long time since he arrived at Dragon Island, he had only twice accidentally mentioned topics related to blood-sucking when he was too excited. Well, it was still difficult to control these at first, but after understanding these, it became a lot easier. Grand Duke Rimmel said leisurely while petting a rabbit, his eyes slightly closed. Sure enough, knowledge is the basis of all power. The more knowledge, the easier it is to cast spells. Moreover, for spells like Dry Touch, even if he has not analyzed it carefully, when activating the ability, he will vaguely feel that his ability resonates with certain parts of the spell model. You want to narrow the scope of this spell? Target the cerebrospinal fluid. This is a bit troublesome, you know, the picture you drew is too precise. The cerebrospinal fluid is too widely distributed. Grand Duke Rimmer was struggling in depression. The presence of cerebrospinal fluid is like a tree spreading out with its dense root system, or like the traces left by the tide soaking through the earth and leaving on the seaside wetlands. It is easier for mental power to lock thicker pipes, but it is too difficult for mental power to lock those extremely thin channels. Not to mention, Master Nordmark studies this spell, to a large extent, to benefit those magicians who have failed in meditation and have runaway mental powers. Their mental power has gone crazy. You still have to rely on your mental power to lock into their cerebrospinal fluid. You can't do that at all. The answer given by Master Nordmark to this difficult problem is, the anatomy of the back, the anatomy of the dead back. After memorizing it clearly, combined with the magnetic scan, we can point out the area where the cerebrospinal fluid is located, use mental power to directly cover it, and directly pump out the water. Master Nordmark, have you ever thought that other people's understanding of anatomy, structures is not as proficient as yours? The Grand Duke asked cautiously. To be honest, the picture of cerebrospinal fluid created by Master Nordmark made him dizzy at first glance, and even more dizzy after looking at it twice. A high-level spellcaster like him, a high-level vampire, and a half-step legend, all looked dizzy. What about the other low-level spellcasters? What about those healers who only have level 1, 2, or 3? Is it all about the necromancer? Before you entered the industry, you just relied on fiddling with your brain and dissecting to understand the structure of the brain? Just thinking about it gives me a headache. If you don't understand this, then you don't need to be a healer. Greet's face was tight and his tone was firm, not letting up at all. Are you kidding me? You don't even know the anatomy, but you want to be a healer? These are all introductory skills. These doctors, before they take the medical examination, before they undergo training, and even before they go to the hospital for internship, they must be very familiar with the situation. That's not what I meant, is there any simpler way? Grand Duke Rimmer was a little wilted under the pressure of Gretel's natural momentum, and said cautiously. For example, let's define something like cerebrospinal fluid. Let the healer have an understanding, and then, when casting the spell, go to the cerebrospinal fluid. Lock up the cerebrospinal fluid and then release a drying touch to extract, say, 1% of the water? This is a good idea. Sure enough, one person can calculate the shortcomings, and two people can calculate the strengths. After everyone discusses it, they will come up with a fresh way. How should cerebrospinal fluid be defined? Which book mentions this? Physiology? Histology and embryology? Solution. Solution. Diagnostics. Still. I mean, can we, for example, draw a little bit of cerebrospinal fluid? Then, let the caster hold it in his hand, even through the test tube, feel it with his mental power, and then put the liquid of the same nature, water take away 1%. Well. Gretel really didn't expect this sudden change of thought. After thinking about it, it actually makes sense. For example, when launching bacteria-targeted killing technique, if you have a bacterial strain in your hand, even taking a look at it can increase the success rate of the spell. So, when launching the cerebrospinal fluid dehydration technique, having a small tube of cerebrospinal fluid in your hand can also increase the success rate of the spell. You give it a try. He tried to ask. The Grand Duke simply handed over the rabbit in his hand. Then, are you here to drain the cerebrospinal fluid? You don't even know how to wear the 4 major surgical attires. Gretel sighed. He simply shaved off a piece of fur from the rabbit and pressed the rabbit into a curled-up position, with its back bent like a shrimp. He touched the space equipment with his right hand, took out the treasured puncture needle, and sighed softly. Oh, this thing, one is used up, one is missing. Thinking about his earliest set of puncture needles, the elders of the dwarf royal court came out in full force to fight for him, life or death. Can't you just use vines? The Grand Duke looked sideways. Gretel shook his head. With vines, it is difficult to grasp the sense of breakthrough. Without the sense of breakthrough, it is easy to overshoot and damage the spinal cord. Where's your mental power? The Grand Duke looked sideways. Greet shrugged calmly, inserted the needle, punctured, broke through, and extracted the cerebrospinal fluid. Of course mental power is easy to use, but when a high-level mage's mental power goes crazy, isn't that the most reliable feeling? A small test tube of cerebrospinal fluid was handed over. The Grand Duke closed his eyes slightly and felt the characteristics of this liquid. Dry touch cerebrospinal fluid extraction version. The rabbit kicked his legs and died. It seems, I need to trouble you to pump a few more times. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1828. It's impossible to smoke more than once, absolutely impossible. For an experiment, repeated lumbar punctures may be performed on rabbits, maybe dozens, hundreds, or even hundreds of times. Greet said that it does not exist, absolutely does not exist. He is already very familiar with waist piercing and other things, and there is no need to practice using this method. On the contrary, his healers need more practice. Teacher, is this, the needle inserted like this? Anivia pressed the rabbit with one hand and held the puncture needle with the other, her cheeks tensed. Greet nodded calmly. Yes, that's it. First, bend the rabbit's body as much as possible. If it is a human, it needs to lie on the left side, with both hands on the knees, to make the lumbar spine kyphosis and widen the intervertebral space. Teacher, can I put a detection magic? Or use mental power to observe? Gretel. Lumbar puncture under X-ray guidance. Or use mental power to observe the position of the bones and then insert the needle. Make sure you don't insert the needle skewed and don't insert it too deep. Alas, the conditions for today's children to practice medical skills are really good. When he was studying medicine, he would have just started inserting needles into any patient under the guidance of X-ray, fearing that the teacher would break his head. Do you want to put patients on the line for no reason? How many more threads do you want to eat yourself? Practice, go back and practice with a dummy. Don't start if you're not familiar with it. I am really happy now. With the guidance of detection magic, X-ray, at least the needle will not go astray, tilt to the left, tilt to the right, hit the bone, and the tip of the needle will be crooked. It is common for the tip of a needle to break. Newbies who have just entered the industry are timid. If they find that the needle cannot penetrate, they will generally not use all their strength recklessly. However, deviation of the puncture position, improper puncture direction, too shallow or too deep puncture will lead to puncture failure. Especially when piercing a child, the child is frightened, crying, and uncooperative. The position and direction of the piercing often become distorted after a little struggle. There is also the piercing of a fat man, which also makes people very desperate. Greet heard a case shared by a teacher in our hospital. In the past 3 years in the hospital, 6 obese patients failed to undergo lumbar puncture. All of them were fat people with a BMI of 40 or above, because they were too fat and could not feel the location of the bones. No depth. In these 6 patients, puncture failed 19 times in total. Finally, 4 cases were successfully punctured under X-ray fluoroscopy, and 2 cases were successfully punctured under CT guidance. The teacher also published a paper specifically for this purpose to tell the newcomers that if it doesn't work, we shouldn't insist on it. If we encounter such a fat person, if we can use fluoroscopy guidance, let's use fluoroscopy guidance. Cough. After sighing with emotion about his struggles back then, Gretel became kind and cheerful when faced with the students' demands. You can still use it if you're just starting to learn, and if you're not skilled with your hands. However, you should try your best to practice until you can locate it by looking with your eyes and touching it with your hands. The person you are going to treat in the future may be of a very high level and you will not be able to find the magic light source in time. It may also be that your mental power is running rampant and your mental power cannot detect it. Yes, teacher. I remember it. I will try my best to be able to locate it with my eyes. Very good, come on, disinfect, pat, delay pain. This is used for surface anesthesia, so that the patient will not struggle due to pain. Then, position, level the puncture needle, and insert the needle. Very good. Insert the needle slowly and feel it with your hand. Which ligaments should the needle pass before moving forward and entering the subarachnoid space? Supraspinal ligament, interspinous ligament, ligamentum flavum. Very good. Anavia's basic skills are quite solid, and when faced with such an unexpected question, she answered it word for word. Greet nodded with satisfaction. Yes, the needle tip penetrates the triple ligament, and when it enters the subarachnoid space, you will feel the resistance suddenly disappear. Just like when you use an awl to pierce cowhide, there is a sense of breakthrough. Remember this feeling. If you feel a breakthrough, stop the injection immediately, otherwise the spinal cord will be damaged. He taught his disciples here, surrounded by a group of necromancers and nature priests, eagerly watching and memorizing. It's a pity that Gretel taught his disciples that outsiders like them are not worthy of asking for advice without permission. Unexpectedly, Gretel suddenly turned his head. Did you all remember what I just said? You also need to be able to do these operations. What do you want me to do? Lumbar puncture is a basic medical operation. If you don't learn it one by one, you still expect me to do it myself every time. Ah, yes. Yes. The healers responded with a roar. Immediately, parchments, quills, and record books were flying all over the sky, making a rustling sound. Write it down quickly. Write down every word. I wrote it down. We will practice with rabbits in the future too. Practice with pigs. Practice with various monsters. By the way, no one is allowed to practice without my permission. If you don't tie it properly, your spinal cord will be damaged. Gretel suddenly turned his head and spoke with a warning. The faces of the nature priests and conjuration healers tightened, but only the necromancer remained proud. Not allowed to use people to practice? That's easy, as long as you are allowed to practice with corpses. Our necromancy department lacks everything except corpses. Brothers over there, do you want to come over to our place and borrow 2 corpses to practice? Hey, speaking of it, if the corpse with spinal cord injury is used to evoke the undead, I wonder if the effect will be worse. If you can't test it with evoking the undead, then you can only dissect it. Gretel saw all their eyebrows and lawsuits, and decided to pretend not to see it. He was such an adult, it was time for him to have some subjective initiative. He just taught Anavia. Come on, insert the needle, do you feel a breakthrough? Very good, stop. Now pull out the needle core. There will be colorless and transparent liquid dripping out of the end of the needle. This is very good. The puncture was successful. Teacher, can I use vines or hollow thorns to pierce it? Anavia suddenly asked. It is too expensive to use this kind of steel needle. Let an alchemist make it, and it is easy to get a price that a patient cannot afford. It's better to use vines or thorns. They can be used to spawn as you use them, and they can be dispelled when they are no longer needed. It's cheap, clean, and doesn't even require disinfection. How wonderful! Ah, you can try it. Gretel tried his best to keep his face from becoming stiff. First of all, the vines or thorns you use must be thin enough, with a minimum diameter of 0.7 mm and a maximum thickness of only about 1.5 mm. Secondly, the strength must be high enough to break through the 3 layers of ligaments and penetrate the dura mater. Thirdly, it can give you feedback. I can give you feedback. The vines and thorns I spawn are just like my fingertips, Anavia replied immediately. Diameter, strength, I'll give it a try. Go and give it a try. Don't be anxious, as I said before, experiment on animals first. Analysis of causes of 50 cases of failed lumbar puncture in children, Journal of Nanchang University, Medical Edition, December 30, 2010. Causes and analysis of lumbar puncture failure in obese body types, Clinical Misdiagnosis and Mistreatment, November 22, 2013. Fat people really have a lot of extra troubles with medical treatment. If you can lose weight, well, try to lose weight. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 1829. Facts have proved that if there are enough victims, no, test subjects, and enough good auxiliary tools, it will be very fast to learn lumbar puncture. Connect the posterior superior skeletal spine and take the midpoint. Take the midpoint. Mark it using the mage's trick. Then use detection magic to observe it yourself and compare it with the point you marked. Practice 10 rabbits. If it doesn't work, practice 10 more. I don't believe you can't do it with 100 rabbits. If you can't do this, stop being a spellcaster. The needle is slightly tilted towards the head. Slightly tilted. Do you know what slightly tilted means? If you don't know, just use detection magic again to see where the seam between the 2 bones goes. The rabbit is convulsing. Sister over there, help me with some healing techniques. Don't insert the needle too deep, you idiot. He said he felt a breakthrough and stopped immediately. If you don't understand, just get a beef spine and poke it 100 times with the needle. Corpse for rent. Corpse for rent. A complete corpse has never been poked, and you can try it at least 20 times. Each puncture costs 1 research point. From my experience, you can practice by renting up to 10 corpses. In 3 days, this group of therapists, after tinkering and tinkering, actually learned to do lumbar puncture on rabbits. The success rate was not to say 100%, but at least 80%. As for whether the spinal cord was punctured, well, the rabbit is still alive anyway. By the time Gretel came to his senses, the group of healers had already begun to try lumbar puncture on living people. Of course, the experiment still needs to be passed on corpses first, and the success rate is high enough before trying it on living people. Of course, as a noble spellcaster, his body is very precious and cannot be damaged. Therefore, These healers, especially the necromancers, went around deceiving the guards and servants of the mage tower, as well as the surrounding natives. Hey, can you do me a favor and let us experiment? I guarantee there will be no problem. Look, the high-level healer is standing by, ready to cast healing spells at any time. Tiga, can you help us practice your skills? Once, just once, practice once, and I will give you a healing potion. Florona, please help me. Greet. First of all, you should do a good job in the pre-operative conversation. You must tell others without any concealment what the consequences will be if you fail. Secondly, let others have full freedom of choice. Finally, you must give enough compensation. Give enough. In this practice frenzy, only Anavia and Leon Carlos did not participate. Greets two disciples, one is busy growing vines and thorns, hoping to use thorns and vines to complete the waist-piercing work. The vines of the blood ivy are too thick and do not meet the requirements. The vines of the black blood vine are too thick. The thorns of the cold iron thorn can't make it hollow. There's no way. The thorns of the emerald ice thorns, the tip strength is still not strong enough. One plant after another was tried, and one plant after another was spawned. As a necromancer, Leon Carlos did not have so many choices. He could only urge the white bones to generate bone spurs and pierce them into the spine. Rabbit, it's easy to prick. Wild boar is a little more difficult, but the bone spurs are strong enough. The 5th level mountain shaking pig, this is more difficult to attack. The output power of the spell must be very strong. Level 10 woolly rhinoceros, I first cut off a piece of skin on the back, but it was almost impossible to pierce it. Why? Are the ligaments of these high-level monsters so strong? The 15th level ice tiger, I can't even stab the corpse. By analogy, what should I do if I encounter a similar situation with a high-level knight? Relying on puncture and drainage is simply not possible. Still have to rely on magic. Relying on magic, the magic resistance of high-level experts. Grand Duke Rimmer didn't care what Gretel was struggling with. He didn't care how many rabbits these necromancers killed during their training, or even how many people they injured or maimed. He didn't care what Gretel's disciples were studying. He was just happy to have a bunch of assistants. It comes as soon as you call it, and goes away as soon as you wave it away. It is full of enthusiasm and never becomes impatient. Even if he tosses 200 rabbits a day, those necromancers will take it seriously and help him draw 200 rabbits. When rabbits are no longer enough, they will automatically realize that they will go out into the wild and play the flute to summon more rabbits. There are enough test subjects, Grand Duke Rimmer's dry touch cerebrospinal fluid version, and it is progressing very quickly. From the very first spell, all the brains were drained, to the moment the spell was released, only half of the cerebrospinal fluid was drained. With another spell, 10% of the water in the cerebrospinal fluid is quickly drained. Finally, I slapped it with a spell and only drained out 1% of the water. Is this okay? Is this okay? Grand Duke Rimmer looked at Greet longingly, hoping that he would say yes so that he could be freed from this research. Please, such a powerful spell. It consumes little and has a strong effect. With just one shot, the enemy will die quickly. What's not to like about this? I have to change it again and again, and again, and again. How slow do you have to change it to be satisfied? Well, it's best to use slow release, 1 drop per second, or 40 to 50 drops per minute, no more than 500 ml a day. You can adjust it. It's better if it doesn't exceed 200-300 ml a day. Greet's voice became quieter and quieter as he spoke. The brains of children, adults, dwarfs, and cloud giants are all different in size. The amount of cerebrospinal fluid produced every day is different, and the drainage speed may also be different. This decompression spell should preferably be controlled once per minute, 1/1440 part of cerebrospinal fluid each time, if it can be controlled once per second, 1/86400 part cerebrospinal fluid each time, that would be great. Grand Duke Rimmer was silent for a long time, then turned and left. Gretel chased after him and shouted. I know this is difficult, but at least write out the spell model. Write out the spell model. Write it out. This request is still acceptable. Greed held the new version of the spell that the Grand Duke had worked out, and threw it to the conjuration system for them to modify, and to the alchemists to develop alchemical equipment for cranial decompression. By the way, it also comes with an automatic measuring device. Once the intracranial pressure reaches the safety line, it will automatically stop thirst touch, so no more pumping. With the collective efforts of the entire Mage Tower, within 1.5 months, the device Greed requested has been developed. Through the communication system of the Mage Tower, it was sent to Nevis and to Archmage Morton. Not long after, I happened to catch up with the highest level therapist in the council, the editor-in-chief of medical research and the 18th level mage of the conjuration system, Archmage Bielsa, who was preparing to attack the 19th level. Okay. Can this thing be used? There is no one stronger than him in the council. Archmage Bielsa has problems on his own, but there is no such a strong person to save him. Okay, let's get ready first. What if it's useful, but, it's best not to use it? Something strange happened to the cat. The cat's home address was registered as a place of business by a company I had never heard of, or the neighborhood committee notified the cat through a census. The cat is going to fight? I'm going to the industrial and commercial office tomorrow to apply for correction. Make a fist. Protect the cat's home. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1830. Archmage Bielsa applied for advanced meditation, which alarmed the entire council, including all high-level mages including the legend. Level 18 Therapist. If this advancement is successful, it will be level 19, and you will be half a legend. If you take another step forward, maybe you can become a legend. How many years has it been since the council had a legendary healer? Even if you can't become a legend, it's still good to be a half-step legend. The stronger the therapist, the better for everyone's safety. Yes, Nordmark Mage has also advanced to level 18, but so what? First of all, he is far away on Dragon Island and will not come back for the time being. Secondly, his research direction is completely different from that of orthodox therapists. Magicians feel that if they encounter mental disorder, magic conflict, siltation, rampage, various spell injuries, magic potion injuries, it is more reliable to go to Archmage Bielsa for such matters. As a result, Archmage Bielsa advanced to meditation and received treatment that clearly exceeded his level of strength. Time Barrier Mr. Steiner sits in the Babel Tower to guard against all accidents. Song of Deep Blue Helena guards the myth lock of Igor Peak, and is always ready to sort out the energy of the Tower of Babel through the mystery lock, to provide energy for his advancement, or to regulate energy fluctuations. In addition, Elder Typros of the Nature Religion was also invited to the Tower of Babel, ready to rescue Archmage Bielsa at any time when something goes wrong. Naturally, the meditation room assigned to him is also among the best among the legendary ones, and only half-legendaries are eligible to enjoy it. Such a high degree of attention means that Archmage Bielsa is well informed and has been busy treating the illnesses of various spellcasters all year round, even saving their lives, and often facing life or death situations. Faced with the attention and resource tilled from the top management, and the healers who were rushing to the door eager to share the danger for him, Archmage Bielsa stroked his beard and said with a smile, "What are you worried about? We have prepared everything we can. As long as the head is not blown up on the spot, it can always be saved. By the way, has the device for reducing intracranial pressure been debugged? It's adjusted. Don't worry. Archmage Morton took a step forward and bowed respectfully. Alas, after this device was completed, they repeatedly debugged and tried it. They even borrowed outer space monsters summoned by the conjuration system and undead creatures stored in the necromancy system to test the anti-magic performance of this device. The higher the level of magician, the stronger the ability to resist magic spontaneously. If when it comes to using it, you find that the magic power is too weak to break through the magician's own magic barrier, it will be a big delay. Fortunately, they raced against time and debugged it. If Archmage Bielsa really needs to use it, if this thing doesn't come in handy, it will be a huge delay. As soon as the door to the meditation room closed, a group of therapists rushed to the monitoring room. As a therapist, Archmage Bielsa is very willing to support the research of his younger generations and is also willing to try new spells. He applied for medical care from the beginning of meditation. The blood pressure is 145/95, which is a bit high, but the old man's blood pressure is usually relatively high. The intracranial pressure is 9, which is not bad. Well, everything seems to be normal now. A group of therapists, a group of disciples, juniors, and colleagues of Archmage Bielsa, crowded in the monitoring room, staring at the constantly beating numbers on the magic light screen without blinking. Elder Tapros was squeezed in the middle by them, looking at this and that with interest. During the advanced stage of meditation, you can use this method to remotely monitor the magician's vital signs, and go in for rescue at any time if something is wrong. Interesting. It would be great if nature priests could do this too. What a pity for those friends who have problems during meditation. Archmage Bielsa's advanced meditation lasted for 1 day, 2 days, and 3 days. The therapists paid close attention during the day on the first day, but relaxed on the first night and took turns. Starting from the second day, the magician on duty will not stare at the magic light screen, but will look at it every now and then. The life monitoring device will automatically alarm anyway, right? In the first 3 days, there were no problems except that Archmage Bielsa's blood pressure slowly rose to 160/110. Starting on the 4th day, he seemed to have entered the stage of trying his best to pass the test. He did not eat, drink, speak or move. He sat upright on the ground, and even his heartbeat and breathing slowed down greatly. And late at night on the 4th day, at around 2 o'clock in the morning, the mental power monitoring device, energy monitoring device, and life monitoring device in the meditation room suddenly sounded alarms at the same time. The mental power has increased significantly. It is suspected that the advancement has been successful and is being sorted out. The degree of energy concentration has increased significantly. The magic circle has been operating automatically, and energy is being transferred and injected into the meditation room for the magician to meditate and absorb. Blood pressure 180/125, heart rate 156, respiration 35. Intracranial pressure 12. Intracranial pressure 12.5. Intracranial pressure 13.2. The therapists, one by one, jumped to their feet. Blood pressure rises sharply, heart rate soars, breathing soars. Generally speaking, during strenuous exercise, heart rate and blood pressure will indeed soar, but will there be any problems if it is so high? How is the Archmage doing? How is the situation now? Can we go in? They rushed out of the monitoring room and rushed to the door of the meditation room, wandering around in circles. Among the communicators, the only healer left behind was still reporting the Archmage situation. The high pressure is over 200. Intracranial pressure is 13.5. Intracranial pressure is 14. Heart rate is 180. With a bang, the door to the meditation room opened, revealing Archmage Bielsa lying on the ground, his clothes disheveled and his face flushed. He opened his eyes blankly, but it seemed that he could no longer see clearly. He scratched his hands upwards, and blood flowed from his nostrils. The mental power is gone. Elder Tapros strode inside and sat down cross-legged in front of Archmage Bielsa. As soon as he raised his hand, an oak tree appeared out of thin air. Its dark green crown enveloped the Archmage, exuding a faint fragrance. Archmage Bielsa's complexion suddenly improved. The three therapists sat down in a straight posture, surrounding the Archmage in the middle, and cooperated with Elder Tapros to channel the mental power of Archmage Bielsa. At the same time, Archmage Morton stepped forward and put the pressure-reducing device in his hand on Archmage Bielsa's head. Start up. The pressure-reducing device was made like a helmet, with countless patterns outlined on its surface using mithril and gemstones. As soon as the magic circuit was activated, Elder Tapros's brows moved slightly. On the magic light curtain, the rising intracranial pressure actually stabilized, and then began to slowly fall. I was kicked out by the Industry and Commerce Bureau and referred to 12,345. Fortunately, after 15 minutes of calling, I finally got through to 12,345. Now my appeal has been transferred to the Industry and Commerce Bureau. Why bother? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1831. Almost died. After 3 hours of rescue, Archmage Bielsa lay on the treatment bed and said something breathless. The sound was buzzing. From the intracranial pressure reduction device, the super sustained release dry touch cerebrospinal fluid version fastened to the head, it vibrated back and forth, and when it finally came out, it was a little bit louder. I'm feeling better now. It's still early for you. Archmage Morton never left, taking care of him for 3 hours. Now he took a long breath and sat down on the floating saucer on the side. The light curtain in front of him rippled, constantly showing the situation of Archmage Bielsa. Blood pressure 165/110, heart rate 85, respiration 18 times/min, blood oxygen 98, intracranial pressure 14.5. The blood pressure is still very high. The systolic blood pressure must be reduced to at least 140, and the diastolic blood pressure must be reduced to at least 90. The intracranial pressure has not yet dropped to the normal value, and this cannot be reduced too fast. Master Nordmark said. Cough. Cough. Ahem. To the left, to the right, and behind, 3 or 4 healing mages spoke at the same time. Senior Brother Morton, can you stop saying Master Nordmark said and Master Nordmark said all the time? We are all therapists. They are all orthodox healers of the conjuration system. Archmage Bielsa is still the leader of our line of healers. If you keep saying this in front of him, he will lose face. Ahem, cough. Archmage Bielsa couldn't help but cough. This cough caused blood pressure and intracranial pressure to rise simultaneously on the light screen. Several disciples were so panicked that they rushed over at the same time. Teacher, are you okay? Teacher, please lie down for a while. Teacher, don't worry, take more rest. If you force yourself to advance, you will always be injured. You have to recover first, and then you can continue to advance. Teacher. Teacher, the communication from Long Island has been taken over. The sound of wheels grinding on the ground suddenly sounded, and 2 11-level healers dragged a tower-shaped box over. On the top of the box, in the magic crystal screen, the face of Master Nordmark was revealed. Have you successfully advanced? Are you out of danger? Congratulations, Archmage Bielsa. Let me take a look at your vital signs. A smile appeared on Archmage Bielsa's pale face. Immediately afterwards, he heard the person on the other side saying, "Why are you lying flat? Rock the bed. Raise the head of the bed 30 degrees. Oh, there is no bed. There is no such thing as a bed, which is not a problem for these high-level therapists. A group of conjuration magicians were busy with their hands and feet, waving their brilliance. Soon, a transparent force field was supported under Archmage Bielsa, making him lie down slightly. Elevating the head of the bed can reduce the amount of blood returning from the jugular vein and reduce intracranial pressure. What about oxygen? Are you inhaling it? Give him oxygen. Reducing the partial pressure of carbon dioxide can constrict the cardiovascular and cerebrovascular vessels and reduce intracranial pressure. Falling. Also, lower the temperature near your head. Ice packs, ice caps, whatever you want will do. He gave a command and the therapists made an action. He raised the head of the bed, assembled an oxygen inhaler, and formed a cloud of ice mist around Archmage Bielsa's head. Hello. Who told me not to talk about Nordmark Mage before? Now the other party's suggestion is here. What does it mean that you work faster than me? Archmage Morton really doesn't know what to say. Fortunately, after a series of actions, Archmage Bielsa's expression actually became more relaxed. Greet's face also relaxed. It seems that you are recovering well. By the way, Archmage Bielsa, congratulations on your successful advancement. Thank you, Archmage Nordmark. Archmage Bielsa smiled slowly in his decompression helmet. Greet quickly waved his hand to him to signal him to quiet down, then turned to ask. Have the results of the MRI scan come back? Not yet, Archmage Nordmark, a young therapist quickly stretched his head and answered. Beside him, Archmage Morton breathed out silently. Hey, once upon a time, that little mage needed the introduction of a high-level mage before he could walk in front of him. The little mage who sat in front of the editor-in-chief of medical research and a group of editors-in-chief, talked eloquently, worked on projects for himself, and promoted cooperation between therapists and the plastic energy department. That little mage who worked hard to solicit sponsorship from everywhere and built a hospital. Now, it will be natural for him to be called Archmage Nordmark by young spellcasters. Archmage Bielsa wears this on his head. It's not convenient for magnetic scanning. Oh, there is a metal helmet on the head. It is more like a cage for perming hair than a helmet. It is really inconvenient to do an MRI. Gretel nodded slightly. Your Majesty, the Archmage is not in danger for the time being. If you can support it, it is best to do a magnetic scan of your head. Comparing the before and after conditions can also determine which brain tissue and which parts of the brain cells have been damaged, so that targeted treatment can be provided. Indeed, if you can make one, it's better to make one diagonally opposite the magic crystal panel. Elder Tapros also nodded. His mental power is still relatively disordered. Simply scanning with mental power can easily cause a collision between the two parties and directly hurt him. With magnetic resonance, the treatment will be more targeted. The important thing is brain cells, brain cells. Being able to treat early and target the disease will benefit the patient much better than throwing treatment techniques aimlessly. Greet proposed, and the legendary elder of the Nature Order agreed. Archmage Bielsa was immediately sent to the evocation department for magnetic resonance. A quarter of an hour later, two three-dimensional images were unfolded in front of everyone. Elder Tapros stroked his long white beard, stared at the contrasting images in front of him, and softly pondered. There is indeed a lot of brain cell damage. A lot of people died here, 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 here. He raised his hand gently, and a faint green light penetrated Archmage Bielsa's head like spring rain. After waiting quietly for about 10 minutes, they were sent in for a magnetic resonance imaging. Not good. Can brain cells regenerate after they are damaged? Greet gave an idea on the other side of the light screen. Do you want to do an animal experiment? It's too late. Elder Tapros took a sharp breath. I thought about digging out a piece of the brain of a rabbit or other animal, or using other methods to kill some brain cells, and then throw in a treatment method to see if the brain cells can grow back. He felt pain in his head, brain, cerebellum, everywhere. Fortunately, even assuming that the brain cells are damaged and cannot regenerate, he has other methods. Limb regeneration technique brain version. With this spell, since even the missing limbs and organs can grow back out of thin air, there is no reason why dead brain cells cannot grow back. I'm much better. I feel like I've almost recovered. As soon as the regeneration spell went off, Archmage Bielsa sat up suddenly, with a high-spirited expression. My mental power is almost healed. I feel that the damage caused by this advancement has basically been recovered. For a moment, all the therapists on the scene were horrified and moved. If the advancement fails, or if the advancement is successful but causes damage to the caster, early intervention is required to lower blood pressure, reduce intracranial pressure, stop cerebral hemorrhage, dissolve thrombosis, and try to protect brain cells. Then, magnetic resonance scans the brain tissue, and performs targeted regeneration of dead brain cells. Can this method preserve the potential of the magician as much as possible and the possibility of his further advancement? At least, can it save him the time to recuperate, recover, and pass the level again? If the effect is really so good, then this method deserves to be promoted on a large scale. At the very least, a study should be conducted to get the bottom of it, and based on the ratio of cost and effect, decide whether to promote it or not. Decided. This is the topic for the next stage. Submit a project application to the Parliament when you get back. Lie down, Gretel shouted from the other side of Dragon Island. Your intracranial pressure hasn't dropped back yet. Thanks to the Strong Sea Monster and Quameow 555 for the 10,000 starting coins. Mau Mau went to the Industrial and Commercial Bureau today and got at least one piece of news. The contents of this random registration belong to self-declaration, so it is not that the Industrial and Commercial Bureau will register the false certificate after seeing it, but they will not care at all. If the certificate is found to be false, they will order it to be corrected and fined. Anyway, the task has now been assigned to the Industrial and Commercial Bureau. I hope it can be changed soon. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1832. Have you heard? The Council is summoning subjects, saying they want to test the burden of advanced meditation on the brain. Do you want to go? Does this test cost money? André Mutter finished an adventurous mission and was wandering aimlessly on the street, planning to find a better restaurant to reward himself. Before I could find the restaurant, a conversation suddenly floated through my ears. I don't know, I heard that the White Tower has posted a notice. Let's go take a look. Go and see. Come together. Test meditation progression? In this adventure mission, I went through life and death. I feel that I have made great progress, and I have a vague opportunity to advance. What is this test for? Will it help me? André Mutter adjusted his mage robe and followed the flow of people going up to the White Tower. There was still half a mile away from the White Tower, and I was already surprised. There are so many people. The public carriages and private carriages carrying guests were already lined up half a mile away. Right here, there is a separate pedestrian passage next to it. There are vendors running around with baskets in their arms, constantly selling. Sir, would you like to buy an apple? Fresh apples. Delicious. Sir, would you like some freshly baked bread? There's butter and jam, all homemade. Madam, do you want to buy a handkerchief? You see your forehead is wet with sweat. Of course the cleaning technique can clean it, but it is not comfortable to wipe with a handkerchief. There is also a kettle here, you can wet the handkerchief and wipe your face. André Mutter bought a piece of bread, added butter, jam, and eggs, and filled his stomach in a hurry. Walk all the way forward, observe all the way, and listen with all your ears. Nives is open to many low-level spellcasters, allowing them to accept tasks. hand in tasks, deliver materials, submit papers, and self-tests. The place commonly known as the White Tower has seen a tenfold increase in traffic in the past few days. Some of the spellcasters who came to the White Tower worked in private mage towers, some were in various production organizations, some were members of adventure groups like him, and some were employed by nobles or wealthy businessmen. Different origins, different identities, all of them asked for leave and came to the White Tower. As soon as I stepped into the White Tower, the notice on the wall was clearly written. André Mutter looked up and found himself in a queue with a sign saying "Sign up for the test." While following the team forward, he pricked up his ears and listened to the questions and answers from the staff and consultants in front. Does this test cost money? If it doesn't say you want money, you don't need money. Inside the counter, the low-level first-level female mage sitting upright adjusted the badge on her chest and smiled sweetly. This test was applied for by a high-level mage of the healing department, and the research budget of the parliament was used. Not only does it cost no money, it doesn't even require food and lodging for the few days to participate in the test. Cut. The magicians booed quietly. André Mutter also pursed his lower lip slightly, who is short of room and board expenses. Those who can become spellcasters are the worst, and they are also the middle-income group in the city. Not to mention living in a mage's mansion with magical guidance and invisible servant service, a clean wooden floor house, and enough firewood in the fireplace, these can always be achieved. Not to mention the 3 meals of Warcraft meat, there is Warcraft milk and divine berry fruit in the afternoon tea. At least I can eat white bread, drink milk, and have meat every meal, so I can still do it. Who would take a few days off and lose a few days of work just for the cost of food and accommodation? It seems that he has just finished the mission. If he is about to set off with the group, he will not waste the opportunity of the whole group to take part in the test. By the way, is this test dangerous? How can advanced meditation be dangerous? In front of another counter, a middle-aged second-level mage asked dully. André Mutter took one look and sighed. He knew this clerk, his name was Martifu, he was from the prophecy department, he was 45 years old, and he had been stuck in the level of second-level mage for 30 years. This guy failed to attack the third-level mage 3 times in a row, damaging his foundation and completely losing the possibility of advancement. So I had no choice but to rely on connections and find a job as a clerk in the White Tower. The reason why this clerk is depressed is probably because he is not qualified to participate in this test. Advancing cannot be without danger. A clear voice rose from the front of another team. What a blessing it is to be able to advance under the care of a high-level therapist. If there is a problem, we can treat it in time. Danger, what is danger? Is there a healer protecting the danger, or is there no healer protecting the danger? But, I'm still a little far away from an advanced breakthrough, will they let me force a breakthrough? A trembling voice asked softly. André Mutter's attention immediately focused. The method of forcibly breaking through is usually to take some stimulating drugs to stimulate mental excitement, so as to break through certain barriers that have blocked oneself for a long time. Such a breakthrough will usually cause damage to the person. It may require a year and a half of rest at the least, or it may damage the foundation and cut off the hope of future breakthroughs. Generally speaking, unless it is absolutely necessary, the Council encourages magicians to progress naturally and not to force themselves to pass the level. It's best to be a magician who has the hope of a natural breakthrough. Master Martief was a little impatient and turned over a page of information. Of course, there are not that many magicians who have reached the edge of natural advancement, and many of them rely on external forces. This needs to be noted when testing. In addition, given that there are not that many magicians in the breakthrough group, there is also an excessive spellcasting group and an over-level spellcasting group. The testers in these two groups are not paid, but are given relevant spellcasting materials, spellcasting guidance, and magic recovery potions. Is that so? Are the conditions so favorable? André Mutter sighed. So, If you really can't break through, you can also join another group, cast spells repeatedly, squeeze yourself repeatedly, and make your mental power stronger through training. This is a good thing. A large part of the reason why he progressed so slowly was that he was reluctant to practice spells. He was too poor to pay for spell materials, rent a practice field, or rent a meditation room. With such good conditions, you must join. Break your head and join in too. The line crawled forward slowly. Andrei Mutter discovered for the first time that there were so many low-level mages in Nevis. It seemed that all low-level mages from Nevis were here. The staff had to repeat over and over again. If you cannot advance within 3 days after receiving the notice and joining the experiment, you will have to take drugs to impact the barrier. If you are unable to progress naturally, and you are unwilling to take medicine, the cost of the meditation room and the cost of experimental tests must be compensated. Here are the compensation standards. Take a look and make sure you can afford it. If you feel that you are still far from advanced, you can join the excessive casting group or the over-level casting group. Don't delay in the breakthrough group. By the way, you may be in the experimental group, or you may be in the control group. The control group means there is no therapist care, no follow-up treatment, nothing, only measurement. You have to think about this clearly. Which group you enter is random. Bribing the staff is useless. It is said that the Babel Tower spirit is in charge of grouping. The experiment is dangerous, you must bear the consequences. No compensation for death or injury. These words are more of a warning than a warning. Indeed, some spellcasters left the team, taking small steps and hesitating next to them. However, more magicians, like Andrei Mutter, resolutely signed the application form. I have been stuck as a 4th level mage for 5 years. If I can reach the 5th level, my status will be completely different. I must seize this opportunity. Breaking through at home is a breakthrough. Participating in the experimental project is also a breakthrough. Even if there is no therapist, you can still use the meditation room for free. At least, the potions they give will be better. 3 days of excessive spellcasting practice will cost me a month's income. You can practice for nothing here. There are people to guide you. I want to come here for this too. Because Andrei Mutter was relatively close to a breakthrough, he was notified 5 days after signing the application form to join the group and join the experiment. When I arrived at the Babel Tower, I entered the special testing floor and put on a loose and soft robe. The first thing I did was I was told to hand over all the metal objects on my body. Keys. Bracelets. Rings. All metal items. Put them all in this box. Don't bring them in for magnetic resonance imaging. Poor operator, who wears a badge belonging to an 11th level mage on his chest and is a figure that Andrei Mutter needs to look up to. At this time, he can only sit at the door of the magnetic room like a nurse and read out the sheets one by one. Have you ever installed metal dentures? Have you ever had nails driven into the bones? Brackets, what are these? No matter. None of them, right? Put the metal items here. I will return them to you when they come out. Don't worry, no one here is greedy for your things. There are no magicians walking around here below the 10th level. As expected, no one is coveting the things of a 4th level mage like him. Andrei Mutter put his things away as instructed, was led into the room, lay down on a narrow hard bed, and was buzzed into a strange-looking tunnel. Boom, boom, boom. The huge noise can almost kill the living and then bring the dead back to life. After being warned, Andrei Mutter refused to move and lay there for an unknown amount of time. Finally, the noise stopped and he heard someone shouting. Come down. He rubbed his forehead, staggered out, and successfully took back all his metal items. However, the next day, Andrei Mutter received bad news. What? I'm not allowed to join the experiment. The main reason is that this experiment is too dangerous for you. The magician in charge of the docking summoned a three-dimensional image and showed André Mutter his brain. Look, there is an abnormal blood vessel mass in your brain. Blood vessels, it is said that if the blood pressure is high, this thing will burst easily, and you will die easily if it bursts. It doesn't mean that you can't advance normally, but for the safety of the experiment, you'd better not join the experiment. Before André could answer, the magician turned around and wrote in the record book. Carrying out preliminary scans for magicians to rule out brain lesions is very effective in improving the safety of advanced levels. It is recommended to carry out safety surveys among high-level magicians. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 1833. 10,000 rewards for the strong sea monster will be added. So what do I do with this thing in my head? Who can treat it? Which therapist can treat it? This. The level 11 therapist looked away. The 14th level therapist who came over after hearing the news looked left and right at the film, and sighed. I don't know how to cure this. I hope you take good care of yourself now. This, a good person, can't be cured by law. There was no rupture, no bleeding, and no abnormality in the blood vessel mass for the time being. In the current situation, even if you throw a healing spell at it, there will be no reaction. Then, there is no other place that can cure me. This. Several therapists hesitated. Treating people before they even get sick may be a way to cure people. For example, ask a necromancer to open the brain, cut out the problematic blood vessels, and then guide the blood vessels to grow again. Of course, how likely a person is to be in danger during the treatment process is another question. For example, a limited wish spell. If the purpose is clear, this method can almost certainly cure the problem. Of course, whether a 4th level magician can afford the limited wish-making spell of the 8th ring is another question. For another example, place your hopes on Oak Grove Hospital. It can't be the healers who are training there, it has to be the Archmage Nordmark himself. Of course, when the Archmage Nordmark, who is currently traveling to Dragon Island, will come back, and whether he will be willing to help him with treatment when he comes back, that is another question. After all, if a person doesn't advance, it doesn't mean he will definitely die. Be it Nevis or the entire Kingdom of Kent, there are so many magicians who are stuck and unable to advance, so who is going to seek death directly? Obviously, there is someone here who wants to die now. After being rejected, evaded, and kicked out of the experimental group one after another, André Mutter's mentality collapsed. Then I deserve to die? It's impossible for me not to pursue advancement all my life. Pursuing advancement is tantamount to seeking death, it's still death. Can you let me participate in your project? Well, we didn't start this project just to kill a few people, although if you have this thing in your head, your blood pressure will rise if you overdo it one day, or your blood vessels will become brittle as you get older, and they may explode. But we didn't kill it. Although it is allowed to have certain risks and even a certain mortality rate when opening this project, that is completely different from knowing that someone is going to die and watching him jump down. Out of sight? As long as he is not killed in my project, it is none of my business where he dies. Obviously, but persuasion had the opposite effect. André Mutter became even more excited. Let me participate. Let me participate. I am willing to sign the paperwork. I am responsible for my life and death. With this thing in your head, as long as you advance in this life, there will definitely be great risks. You still have to take risks. There is a difference between having a high-level therapist to take care of you and not having a high-level therapist to take care of you. That is the difference between a narrow escape from death and a life from 99 deaths. There is a ready-made opportunity in front of him, why doesn't he give it a try? He is only 25 years old. He doesn't want to be a 4th-level mage for the rest of his life. Instead of enduring a lifelong journey with no hope, venturing in the wild, fighting monsters, and finally dying in an unknown wilderness. He would rather give it a try. This. Didn't I sign a magic contract? Didn't it say in the magic contract that I was allowed to participate in the experiment? This is also written in the spell contract. All interpretation rights belong to the Magic Council and the experimental team. The 11th level magician who received him also became tougher. We think you are not suitable to participate in this experiment, so we can prevent you from participating. Please leave. No. Think about me again. You have to accumulate data anyway, right? Well. A long sigh. Archmage Morton walked out with his hands behind his back, looked up and down, and looked at the persistent 4th level mage. Let him join the experiment. Archmage Nordmark said that older magicians tend to have fragile blood vessels and bleed easily. It is also good to accumulate a few rescue cases. No Nordmark Archmage? Is it that Nordmark Archmage? Is it his project? André Mutter felt his heart skip a beat. Nordmark Archmage, is he the Nordmark Archmage who developed penicillin, cowpox, and caesarean section? It is said that in his hands, there is no disease that cannot be cured and no one who will die. Oh, it's not his project, he just has some ideas. We are working on this project. Archmage Morton glanced at the young mage in front of him with pity. How about it? Do you want to participate? Want? André Mutter gritted his teeth and made up his mind. Even if Archmage Nordmark is not in charge, this project cannot be missed. Maybe, the Archmage Nordmark will take pity on him, and when will he be willing to take action to cure him completely? So, André Mutter put on all kinds of surveillance magic, entered the meditation room, and sat down. On the left is a mental potion for impacting the barrier, on the right is an emergency healing potion, and beside him is a quiet, docile, and abundant magical power. Outside, there are many high-level healers waiting. If he falls, someone will rush in to save him at any time. Use examination methods that he is not familiar with, and use treatment methods that he is not familiar with, but he will try his best to save him. André Mutter's mood gradually calmed down. He closed his eyes and began to sort out the magic knowledge he had learned. He began to soothe his mental power, encourage his mental power, and try to imprint new spells to make himself jump to the next level. The blood pressure is rising, but not quickly. After all, he is a young man, like Archmage Bielsa, alas. In the monitoring room outside the meditation room, several therapists whispered to each other. Archmage Nordmark said that older people and more grease in their blood will make people's blood vessels weaker and narrower in some places. How old is Archmage Bielsa? So, you should exercise if you can, lose weight if you can, try to stay in shape, and it's best to have a certain level of warrior. I said, let's eat less roast goose today, right? You are so busy at work, how can you survive without eating meat? Another therapist objected. According to me, we still need to exercise. Can we suggest to the council that we set up a training ground in the Mage Tower so that everyone can practice warrior skills? What's the reason? The Archmage Nordmark said. The Archmage will definitely beat you to death when he hears this. So let's launch a census, right? About the degree of obesity and the degree of fragile and narrow blood vessels. Once we have the data, we can apply. Stop talking, there's something wrong with the patient. In the meditation room, André Mutter felt that his advanced meditation went very smoothly this time. The mental power surged upwards in waves, and soon crossed a certain limit. And the spell he studied before, the spell configuration of Fireball, is also being imprinted smoothly, half. 60%. 70%, almost ready, almost successful. As long as the engraving is successful, I will be a 5th level mage. Whether it's strength or social status, you can reach a big level, and your whole person will be different from now on. My heart is pounding, beating faster and faster, and my temples are also beating. I'm a little dizzy, but it's okay, I can still hold on. As you advance, if you consume too much mental energy, there will always be problems of one kind or another. Just get over it and you'll be fine. The engraving of Fireball technique is gradually being completed. 80%, 90%, it's about to be completed, but the last few magic lines still can't be condensed. Andre Mutter tried his best, gathered his energy, and tried 3 times in a row. After 3 attempts and 3 failures, he finally lost patience, grabbed the mental potion next to him, and drank it in one gulp. The fiery energy spread from his stomach, and his whole body became hot. Andre Mutter felt refreshed, and taking advantage of this momentum, he condensed another magic line. Then, the second, third. Success. Finally succeeded. Powerful energy swept in from all directions and rushed into his meditation world. A burst of joy swept through his body, and Andre Mutter almost wanted to shout, want to jump up and dance. It was like a wire snapped. His vision went dark and he fell softly. Cerebral hemorrhage. Yes, it's obvious cerebral hemorrhage. It can be seen clearly under the spiral magic scan. 3 or 4 healing spells fell on the head, and the healers gathered together and whispered. Look, this should be the location of the blood vessels in his brain. It's obvious that the blood is the most here, and it's the blood vessels that burst. The treatment is very timely. It shows that when there is a risk of cerebral hemorrhage, timely monitoring and timely treatment are very effective in saving the magician's life. Blood pressure. Thrombolysis. Intracranial pressure. Andre Mutter is just a special case. There are many magicians who are not as special as him, and they join the experiment one after another. Advancing meditation, especially if it cannot be done naturally, using drugs to stimulate it, is almost always accompanied by a sharp rise in blood pressure. In this case, there is a 30% probability that the intracranial pressure will exceed the safety line. Comparing the test data before and after the advancement, if the intracranial pressure exceeds the safety line, there is a high probability that it will cause the death of brain cells. Early intervention and timely medical intervention can greatly improve the survival rate of magicians. Compared with the control group, the mortality rate of the experimental group was reduced by 35%, and the recovery time was shortened by an average of 31.5 days. Overloading spells and overstepping spells can also cause blood pressure to rise significantly. However, the probability of excessive intracranial pressure is much smaller, only 5%. Experiments have proven that medical intervention is very useful and should be rolled out as soon as possible. Let's demand medical intervention as a permanent measure, ask Parliament for the money. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1834. Standard version: treat serious injury, 700 gold coins per time. Used for rescue of mental violence, at least 3 starts. Thrombus dissolving magic, 1000 gold coins per time. Used to rescue mental violence, at least 3 times. Intracranial pressure reduction equipment is rented for 1000 gold coins per hour. At present, the average time required is more than 12 hours. The Magic Council really took the research results, papers, and appeals submitted by the therapists very seriously. It can effectively save the magician's life. It can effectively shorten the recovery time after the magician advances. It can ensure that after the magician advances, his potential will not be reduced, or only a small amount will be lost. Such a good method must be promoted. Definitely promote it. Even if 10 archmages can save one, the council will still make a profit. Of course, how to promote it is another matter. The financial resources of the Parliament are not unlimited and cannot be used casually. Is it a mandatory promotion that requires installation in every mage tower and every meditation room used for advancement, or is it a non-compulsory promotion and is left to the magicians to choose freely? Should the Parliament subsidize and reimburse it, include it in medical insurance, or let the magicians pay for it themselves? Should it be promoted only in Nevis, or cover wizard towers everywhere? This all requires research. Research. The focus of the research is the effect, cost, and the financial affordability of magicians. The information was received on the first day, and the Parliament held an internal meeting on the second day. On the third day, the review committee members, the magicians in the financial direction, and the magicians responsible for formulating medical insurance policies sat together and listened to the therapists. Quotation. Dynamic vital sign monitoring, including heart rate, respiration, blood pressure, intracranial pressure, lasts for 1 hour, and costs 1,000 gold coins once. Soothing technique, relax blood vessels, lower blood pressure, 300 gold coins per time. Used for rescue, at least 5 times. Surround detection magic scan, the price is different according to the level of the magician. The minimum is 1,000 gold coins, the maximum is applicable to half-step legend and 5,000 contribution points. Magnetic resonance scan, this does not increase according to the magician level, the fee is a flat fee of 5,000 contribution points. Wait, listening to the increasingly outrageous quotes, Archmage Field, a level 14 mage of the change department and the current member of the review committee, wiped his cold sweat and stopped. Your quotation is too outrageous. Forget about a few thousand gold coins, how many magicians can afford 10,000 contribution points? He must be at least a level 10 magician or above. Even level 15 or above. Those first dash, second dash, and third level magicians are good if they can spend a dozen gold coins every day. Even if they work hard to advance, they will lose everything at most, but they can still save hundreds or thousands of gold coins. These gold coins are also used to buy medicine, rent a meditation room, and buy spell models. There is definitely not much budget left for treatment and life-saving. Of course, low-level mages don't seem particularly valuable to the upper echelons of the council. A few deaths out of 100, or even a dozen deaths out of 100, wouldn't be too distressing. Anyway, people have to die in order to advance. However, if we can save more low-level mages at a relatively low cost, that would be a good thing. Spellcasters, even low-level casters, their power and production capacity are beyond ordinary people. Even if they lose all power, their knowledge can still make them live well and create greater value for the kingdom and the parliament. A high-level mage must be able to afford it. Archmage Morton sat across from the long oval table, face to face with the jury member. He is level 17, while the opponent is only level 14. He is not vain at all for bargaining price. We have interviewed at least 100 archmages above level 15, and they all said that the risk of advancement is very high, and they are willing to pay a price of more than 10,000 contribution points to ensure their own safety. As he spoke, he pushed over a thick piece of parchment, which was densely packed with tables and curve charts. These days, the therapists have mobilized their extensive network of contacts to visit all the magicians, friends of the magicians, and disciples of the magicians who have treated their illnesses. As for those with lower grades and poor financial capabilities, there are cheaper options to choose from. For example, magnetic resonance scanning is used for subsequent brain cell repair. If you don't want to choose it, you can not choose it. Then at least 5,000 contribution points are needed. No, considering that it needs to be done once before and after meditation, 10,000 contribution points are saved. In addition, targeted brain cell repair requires a 7-ring regeneration technique, which costs a lot of money. Surround detection magic scan is used to determine cerebral hemorrhage. If the magician level is relatively low, the cost is not high. Archmage Morton continued to count down calmly. Treatment of serious injuries and thrombolytic magic are really unavoidable. If you do, you will die. To reduce intracranial pressure, you can first try raising the head of the bed and applying ice. There is no charge for this. Oxygen does charge, but it is worth it? Very low. Well, that sounds pretty good. Archmage Field relaxed a little and began to calculate. A total of 5 to 6,000 gold coins, a 5th level mage, will probably ruin everything, but compared with one life, it is still cost effective. For 7th, 8th, and 9th level magicians, it is not very difficult to spend this amount of money. As for high level mages, those above level 15 can buy a life with 10,000 contribution points, and even ensure that their advancement potential is not compromised. This is a great thing. As long as they are willing to pay, then let them pay. Of course, from his standpoint, bargaining is inevitable. Archmage Field thought for a while, put on a sincere expression, and began to struggle. Can't it really be cheaper? You see, your team carried out this research relying on the Parliament's human network and receiving the Parliament's research funds. As usual, this research result serves the Parliament, so it should be cheap, right? If you go through the council to purchase in bulk, the healing technique will definitely be cheaper. This is the usual practice. Archmage Morton also answered very seriously. Thrombus dissolving magic, this was created by the team of Archmage Nodmark. Ask them if you can get a discount for bulk purchases. Archmage Field let out a breath. Master Nordmark has always been easy to talk to, especially when it comes to magic that heals diseases and saves people. He is willing to promote it even if he doesn't need any money. However, it is not his authority to discuss with Long Island. He will report it later and ask a legend to come forward and ask His Excellency Crown of the Fierce Sun to relay it. The soothing spell is okay. The level of this spell is relatively low, and most magicians can afford it. Reducing intracranial pressure, can't it really be cheaper? I'm going to ask you about the transformation department. Archmage Morton spread his hands. If the manufacturing cost of that helmet cannot be reduced, what can he do? The manufacturing cost is there. The rent of 1,000 gold coins per hour is just enough to cover the cost, which is not too high. The deposit has not been confiscated yet. Archmage Field sighed gloomily. He also had an idea of the cost of customizing this thing. The president of the Alchemy Guild did it himself, and also provided a lot of favors and private materials. When can standardization and process be achieved, and when can mass production be achieved, costs can be reduced. Before this, 1,000 gold coins per hour was really not that high. Of course, there is another way to reduce intracranial pressure. From Archmage Nodmark, there is a special medicinal material that can be injected intravenously to help lower blood pressure. The cost of medicinal materials, 1 serving per day, 10 gold coins per serving. The cost of injections, including infusion tubes, infusion needles, the cost of natural priests to induce vines, and the cost of potion preparation, 5 gold coins per day. He reached out and pushed it forward, and a small glass bottle crossed the table. 200 grams of white powder was sealed in a brown, light-proof glass bottle. Archmage Field sensed the materials inside, calculated the price, and sighed. It would be nice if it could be cheaper. Is it true that the price cannot be reduced? Is it true that it cannot be reduced to 1 gold coin? According to his induction, this medicinal powder does not have any magical power, which means that it can be refined by ordinary workers. This kind of medicinal powder was made by the Archmage Nordmark using the limited wish technique to refine the original version, and then using the original version as the standard, using the refining circle. Archmage Morton spread his hands helplessly, causing the other person to take a breath of cold air. Yes, the limited wishing technique starts with a diamond of 10,000 gold coins. To make up for this cost alone, at 10 gold coins per copy, 1,000 copies would have to be sold. The fee charged by the Archmage Nordmark is really gentle in the extreme. What about the surround detection magic scan? The magic light source can be provided by the Parliament. Isn't it really cheap? What about the magnetic resonance scan? 5,000 contribution points. If the Light Source Council provides it, and the computing power is also provided by the Council, we can talk about magnetic resonance scanning. This needs to be discussed with the Plastic Energy Department. This inspection method is said to have been invented by the Lord of Thunder. Bargain, haggling to death. The two sides fought to the end and finally came up with the first version of the trial plan. Magicians below the third level, with a parliamentary identity certificate, can enjoy advanced medical care through meditation once a year at half price. Vital sign monitoring and comfort techniques only. For third level and fourth level magicians, the half price range is expanded to include vital sign monitoring, treatment, thrombolytic spells, soothing spells, and intravenous drip for blood pressure reduction. For magicians from level 5 to level 9, the half price range, in addition to the above spells, also includes surround detection magic scanning and intracranial pressure reduction magic. For magicians above level 10, the half price range is increased to magnetic resonance scanning. For magicians above level 15, the half price range is increased to regeneration brain cell version. All tickets for non-magicians are full price and can be paid with contribution points or gold coins. Of course, other healers can also exchange resources with the council by contributing healing skills. How about it? Are you coming? It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1835. Quamiao 5.55 million reward plus more updates. I really want to go back to Nevis. In Heartland City, the old Master Gearman put down the latest issue of Magic in his hand and let out a long sigh. 3 years after 3 years, 3 years after 3 years. As a child from a county town, he was recommended to study in Nevis, and because of his mediocre grades, he was sent to Heartland City to preside over the Mage Tower in this small town after he advanced to the 5th level Mage. Year after year, the days passed like water, one after another, Mage apprentices emerged, advanced, and fell silent. Or you may leave your hometown to study and work outside, and after a few years, you will be sent back a message telling you where you died. And like Gret Nodmark, there is only one person who has risen to great heights. In all the years he has been in charge of the Mage Tower, there is only one. Before and after this, the highest magician who came out of Heartland City was only a 5th level mage. Now, returning from Nevis, waits to take over his duties and preside over this Mage's Tower. And he is old. He has white hair and a stooped figure. He is a little shaky when he walks, and the operation of his magic has begun to be a little sluggish. The high-spirited spirit when he and Lin An teamed up to cross the hall straight had gradually faded away, as if they were in a dream. Moreover, the last time little Gretel returned home, he was at level 6. After so many years, even if the resources have been sufficient, his mage level is still stuck at level 6. Seeing that guy Lin An going up to level 9, level 10, level 11, all the way up, he faced failures again and again. I have tried level 7 twice and failed twice. Each time, I feel that my mental strength has weakened a lot, and I am further away from the success of the advancement. Master Gearman himself had a vague feeling that if he hit it again, he might die. That's it, just like that, living a peaceful, wealthy, and respected life as a 6th level magician, and growing old slowly, but, I'm still a little unwilling. Just when he was about to despair, the new issue of Magic brought unexpected good news. The Magic Council has issued a policy to provide half-price meditation advanced medical care services to magicians registered with the Council. He is a 6th level magician and can enjoy vital signs monitoring, ensuring that if something goes wrong, someone will rush in to save him as soon as possible. Enjoy comfort, lower blood pressure, surround detection, magic scan, treatment, and thrombolysis. In case of cerebral hemorrhage, the bleeding can be stopped immediately, ensuring no sequelae. You can also enjoy the latest intracranial blood pressure lowering magic. Even if your brain feels swollen and painful, and the things in your head feel like they are about to rush out, you can slowly be soothed. Half price. In the best case, he might only need to pay 5,000 gold coins. Even in the worst case, he should be able to get it done with 10,000 gold coins. 10,000 gold coins, the wealth he has accumulated in his life, plus some contributions, it is enough. Anyway, he is not married and has no children, so he will give it a try. Otherwise, who will give the money to? If you can advance successfully, or at least survive, you can always make money again. The saddest thing about people is that they die before their money is spent. Unfortunately, magic clearly states, due to the limitations of magic devices and caster training conditions, this medical care is temporarily only available in Nevis. Magicians in need, please go to Nevis. Come here. Please come to Nevis. Please come to Nevis. Master Herman touched his savings, touched the familiar desk, familiar armchair, and familiar covered armrests in the wizard's tower. Now that I am getting older, I want to go north to Nevis, to that place that I was once familiar with but is now unfamiliar. Where to live? Is the familiar pub still open? Now go to Nevis. How long does it take to wait in line for medical care? Master Gearman hesitated again and again, and struggled again and again. Alas, there are some favors that I don't want to use, but now it seems that I still have to use them. He rummaged through the desk drawer, carefully selected the smoothest piece of paper sprinkled with silver powder, and sharpened the quill again and again. I calmed down and began to write. My dear friend Lynn. Compared with Master Gearman, the Archbishop of the Nevis God of War Temple had a much shorter time to struggle. As soon as the invitation letter from the Magic Council arrived, the Archbishop immediately nodded his head in the temple and prepared to leave for the Tower of Babel. Go. Go. Pull out as many as you can. Isn't it just healing skills? You are idle day by day. If you use a few more healing spells, you will be exhausted. But Your Excellency the Archbishop. The younger God of War priest tried to struggle. It's not like we have nothing to do. Every day, in addition to treating the soldiers, we spend the rest of the time praying, making holy water, and making healing scrolls. As for dragging us to work for the magician in vain. Who has worked in vain? Who has worked in vain? Huh, the Archbishop's beard was spread out, and he looked almost bigger. His heavy palm slapped the table, and the 1.5-inch thick teak table creaked and almost shattered on the spot. This is about learning a skill. Learning healing spells. What does it cost to learn healing spells? Do you need me to teach you? Have you learned the spell? That's it after you learn it? What about the technique? What about the timing of casting the spell? But Your Excellency the Archbishop, do we really need this thrombolytic magic or medical monitoring to help with meditation? There were still priests who were pointed out and tried to resist. Our warriors all advance in battle, who needs this? Even if we are priests, we meditate and advance, don't we rely on the grace of the God of War? What do you mean by the divine grace of the God of War? The Archbishop refused to give in. We have to do everything we can and use all our methods. He started. Immediately, all the God of War priests present echoed in unison. Usual training, preparation before battle, weapons, armor, all equipment, as well as our strategy and bravery. Then, we can pray for the grace of the God of War. So do you understand? The Archbishop glared at the priests present with such arrogance that everyone who had objections made them lower their heads. If you don't learn healing techniques that you can learn, and don't use things that are useful, what does it mean to make every effort? Huh. Going against God's will is a sign of impiety. Besides, you don't need it, those soldiers still need it. How many soldiers have their heads broken during daily training and battlefield battles? If there is bleeding outside, there will be no bleeding inside the brain. Alas, these tough-headed guys. When the Magic Council comes up with something new, if they don't just follow it and learn it, they have to think of ways to rush it. Look at the nature order next door. They have already sent 2 groups of people to the Nordmark Mage. They will learn any new spells immediately. No, they will simply participate in the research and development. The natural priests who stayed here also tried their best to get as close as possible to the people in the council. No, there are several elven legends coming to the council, and there are people from the nature order who have been staying there for a long time. He kicked and beat them, and only had to use divine magic to force them all to the Magic Council. At the door of the meditation room, they bumped into the Archbishop of the Spring Water Temple. Everyone pretended not to see anyone and drifted past in silence. Isn't it just releasing the healing technique? Isn't it just that the Congress needs free labor to promote the medical care plan? Yes, yes, we have plenty in the God of War Temple. Of course, let us learn the thrombolytic technique and the intracranial pressure measuring technique by the way. Oh, by the way, there's one more thing we can't forget. Oak Grove Hospital. Whatever new spells the Nordmark Mage develops, the healers there are always the first to learn them. It has been decided that starting from tomorrow, the number of Ares priests rotating at Oak Grove Hospital will be doubled. So, the Temple of the God of War has accumulated a lot of cases recently. Gretel was surprised. He is also training his healers, helping them with meditation, mainly treating myocardial infarction and stroke. However, in this world, there is a problem with the understanding of these cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases. Many people suddenly collapse, suddenly become comatose, suddenly become paralyzed, and do not even know to come to the hospital to seek treatment. Greed originally thought that he would start with the nobles, spread the principles and treatment methods of stroke bit by bit, and gradually spread it to the common people. He never expected that the Temple of the God of War would actually provide him with a large number of cases. Where did their cases come from? Well, the main reason is that the soldiers train harder. Most of the wounded who are sent to our hospital have brain trauma, so we just check whether there is cerebral hemorrhage. Gretel. You did this on purpose, right? You deliberately maimed someone and brought him to the hospital for treatment, right? Now that cerebral hemorrhage can be cured, we are becoming more rude, right? He couldn't bear to think of the guy who came up with the idea, and simply thought of cerebral hemorrhage, and continued to ask about the recent progress of treatment. After asking, I got another question. The council asked if these latest healing techniques could be made into spellcasting devices or scrolls and sent to distant places. After all, it's not just the Kingdom of Kent, we also have friends far away who need this. There are so many people who want to be protected during advancement. Not just Nevis, not just the Kingdom of Kent. As soon as the papers in Magic and Arcana were published, the Magic Council has received 50 or 60 communications during this period, covering more than a dozen different forces. It reaches the Great Wasteland in the north, the Kingdom of the Sun in the south, the New World in the west, and the Black Forest and the Orc Kingdom in the east. The Magic Council's answer to these barbarians, dwarves, orcs, vampires, and nobles of the old world is always, sorry, we haven't finished analyzing some new spells yet, so we can't make them into scrolls yet. Sorry, the spiral scan must be supported by the Mage Tower Spirit, otherwise the calculation will not be that fast. Sorry, magnetic resonance scan, if it wasn't for the legendary mage, there must be a Mage Tower. Want medical attention? Come to Nevis.